Studies. And this morning, she will deliver a speech on Muslim environmentalism. And then, thank you very much for waiting, Professor Gade. And you will have maybe 15 minutes until 20 to deliver a speech. It's up to you. But yeah, we thought for the ado, I'd like to invite you to deliver a speech. Thank you very much. It's time for you.
You'd like to start right away?
Yep. Yes, you can start now. Do you hear me?
Do you have the slides, or should I share my screen?
Oh, okay. Is there any slide that you... Okay. Can you share your slide already?
Ya. Coba Pak.
Yeah. Okay, we can see you.
Sudah, ya?
Yes, sudah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Good morning, everyone. If you can't hear me, please let me know. Yang terhormat, Pak Rektor, distinguished scholars, sahabat-sahabat, dan teman-teman sekalian, saya ingin mengucapkan terima kasih yang sebesar-besarnya atas kesempatan ini. Saya sangat senang berpartisipasi dalam panel yang luar biasa ini. Dan insya Allah, saya harap diskusi kita hari ini akan memberikan manfaat tidak hanya bagi kita semua, tetapi juga bagi orang lain serta generasi yang akan datang. Amin. Hari ini, saya akan menggunakan slide dalam bahasa Inggris, namun saya akan berusaha menyampaikan presentasi ini dalam bahasa Indonesia sedikit, campur dengan bahasa Inggris. Saya mohon maaf sebelumnya kalau ada kesalahan dalam penyampaian saya. There's gonna be mistakes, I'm sure. So I'll be speaking in Indonesian and English today for this brief presentation on what I understand is the theme of the conference, which is Islamic law, religion, and sustainability. I'd also like to say at the outset that I've been working with the UN system now for about 30 years, sejak 30 tahun. Ever since I did dissertation research at IAIN Alauddin Makassar in the 90s, sejak tahun 90-an. And I consider UN Sunan Kalijaga actually to be part of a keluarga besar for myself. So sebenarnya ceramah pertama itu yang saya menyampaikan mengenai topik ini, yaitu lingkungan dan agama Islam, ada di kampus itu di Jogja pada tahun 2011 kalau tidak salah, invited by Professor Dr. Nur Afwan, who invited me today, and I'm very grateful for that. So since this topic has been the focus of my research interest for about 20 years now, I am just amazed that the Ministry of Religious Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia has taken it up programmatically since the publication of this book in 2019. Saya telah menulis buku ini yang memberikan pandangan komprehensif tentang hubungan antara Islam dan lingkungan. Sejak diterbitkannya pada tahun 2019, buku ini yang berjudul Muslim Environmentalism banyak perkembangan telah terjadi di Indonesia dan di tempat lain. sehingga bidang ini semakin berkembang. And we can see this in the theme of the conference today, in fact. Secara umum, buku ini menjelaskan pertama, bagaimana Islam dapat dijadikan sarana untuk kepentingan lingkungan dalam rangka melestarikan alam semesta. Dan kedua, bagaimana orang-orang yang sungguh-sungguh religius mengarahkan perhatian mereka pada lingkungan untuk mencapai cita-cita dan tujuan Islami. So, coming from both directions. Buku ini bersifat global, namun contoh utama yang digunakan berasal dari Asia Tenggara, khususnya Indonesia. Gunung Merapi appears in the very first pages, and again, I'm grateful to Professor Dr. Nur Ikhwan for guiding me there. The book considers the Quran, eco-theology, or what I was calling eco-da'wah back in 2010, the Sawaf, applied programs, including dari pihak LSM, and it has a chapter on law as well. The latter is what I'd like to focus on today, because the materials for the conference were emphasizing law. There's actual rulings, of course, from fiqh, from Islamic law about resource management and environment, but today I'd like to focus more on principles that relate to these rulings as both derivations and as inspirations. Perhaps as an aspect of and counterpoint to what is often called eco-theology, and I understand that you have heard directly from Pak Menteri about that perhaps this morning. Dalam pendekatan ini terhadap teori dan praktek lingkungan dalam tradisi Islam, dampaknya tidak selalu muncul melalui legal reasoning syariah. Misalnya, pada hal ini dijalankan melalui analogi, seperti dengan menafsirkan prinsip-prinsip umum pengelolaan sumber daya dari contoh konkret seperti penggunaan air. So I'm going to look at three kinds of frameworks. As interest in Islamic law and environment grows in graduate programs, programs in Pascasarjana across UIN campuses in Indonesia, I think it might be helpful to offer just a few frameworks for how to approach questions about Sharia, including Fiqh al-Bid'ah, in theory and practice. So today I'm going to present these as first mechanisms that are being developed and applied in Indonesia, like al-Qaf, Fatawa, and so on. Second, principles from Islamic legal practice, salient especially for sustainability. And then finally, ethics like environmental justice that relate to legal and ethical systems more broadly. The theme for today is sustainability, but I can say from my own work now as a professor of environmental studies, including teaching in the MBA program in climate change at Universitas Islam Indonesia Internasional, 3I or IIIU, as I say in English, I can say that climate, sustainability, and issues like conservation, in fact, are quite different, especially in how we approach them with ethics in mind. And I've spoken on this at a few more events in the past year, along with education and eco-theology, and I'm happy to discuss that more in Q&A. The application of legal and environmental mechanisms in Islam are both direct and symbolic. Terbuka peluang untuk menerapkan ajaran sosial keagamaan. Misalnya, khimah dan harim, yaitu kawasan konservasi umumnya di sekitar sumber air, dalam tradisi Islam merupakan contoh penerapan gagasan konservasi yang kuno dan bersifat nabawi ke dalam konteks modern. Dan inisiatif semacam ini sudah diterapkan di Jawa Barat, and such a mechanism in general is being applied in smaller areas, and as such it has a symbolic function as much as an empirical one. In fact, a lot of aspects of Islamic ritual law, of ibadat, are environmentalized to impact sustainability practices through more of a symbolic authority, such as green Ramadan, green Hajj, and so on. Fatwas also occupy this line between real and symbolic, symbolic is also real, which is so characteristic of the study of religion and theories like that of Clifford Garrett's and others. On the one hand, fatwas may be a mechanism like rights of nature or community-based rights, like real law and practice. On the other hand, they characteristically have no enforcement and even duplicate environmental civil law. I have a 2012 article on this about MOE, and there's been a lot of work in Indonesia since then, including new fatwas. Now, many, like our students, are familiar with environmental fatwas, like the famous 2014 ruling on wildlife management called the Tiger Fatwa. That's why pictures of the Sumatran tiger here. It was produced in cooperation with the NGO WWF. Jadi, salah satu area yang dapat diamati dalam perkembangan aktivitas ini adalah fatwa atau fatwa-fatwa yang telah menjadi bentuk populer dalam Islam lingkungan. Sebagai contoh, ada kasus fatwa harimau pada tahun 2014. Next, the second mechanism, which I think is becoming even more well-known, although quite rapidly over the last year or two. Selain itu, salah satu kekuatan Islam dalam mendorong tindakan lingkungan terletak pada kemampuannya mengembangkan strategi yaitu public reasoning dan mekanisme yang diterapkan dalam fiqh. Pendekatan ini sudah dikenal dalam bidang hukum dan keuangan, termasuk dalam skema seperti blended finance. Kadang fokusnya adalah pada pembuatan instrumen konkret seperti green support atau perluasan konsep wakaf agar dapat diterapkan pada objek-objek lingkungan, misalnya pohon. So these pictures are actually from just a few months ago in Bogor. There's a professor at ITB that's been working on wakaf pohon and has written about it. Maybe some of you are familiar with his work, and of course that is Professor Fakhruddin Mangunjaya from UNAS, who has done so much over the last 25 years to develop this area. In just a year or two, the idea of wakaf for environmental purposes I've seen taken off across Indonesia. I've been looking at that in West Sumatra in particular. There's a lot of socialization to be done, as well as refinement of models of how productive wakaf land can also be in the service of, say, conservation. And I think it's a fascinating area, especially from the perspective of theft, as well as environmental law. Pada tahun 2011, ketika saya berada di Yogyakarta, para intelektual di sana, dan di berbagai tempat lain mulai memikirkan konsep ekoteologi dan berbasis pada gagasan al-ard or the earth. Sebenarnya, Dr. Yusuf Qaradawi dari Mesir telah lebih dahulu mengembangkan ide ini dalam analisisnya mengenai degradasi lingkungan, khususnya dalam konteks fossil.org yang juga merupakan konsep penting dalam pertimbangan hukum. Semakin sering prinsip hukum Islam seperti jangan menimbulkan kerusakan or do no harm, or in Arabic la darar wa la dirar, prinsip-prinsip kebaikan publik or public good seperti istislah, maslahah, serta maqasid syariah ini kembali muncul dalam diskursus tentang lingkungan. This trend reflects, I think, a growing interest in applying classical Islamic legal and ethical frameworks to contemporary environmental challenges, showing how long-standing religious principles are being reinterpreted in light of urgent planetary concerns. Diskursus seperti ini sebelumnya sempat menjadi pertanyaan-pertanyaan baru di ruang publik belakangan ini. So we actually hear this in the public sphere as well. For example, the idea of maqasid syariah, which is common reasoning, has come up also in the discussions of ormas and mining concessions over the last year or more. It's often used in justification of environmental fatwas too. A widespread rationale for Islamic legal thinking about the environment through the framework of rights deploys precisely this. The premise, as you all know very well, holds that most fundamentally, the law upholds 5 aims, or maqasid is its criteria: life, religion, reasoning, property, and heritage. And the point typically comes up right away in presentations of environmental law and Islam. The ethical argument that follows from this is that none of the maqasid, including life itself, can be maintained in the absence of a healthy biosphere. Therefore, the most fundamental principle to uphold from an Islamic legal and ethical perspective is environmental well-being, or the necessity of survival, which in turn ensures the 5 aims for all. So that's an example of principles in action. Let's dig in a little bit more to some hadith just for a moment. This is the kind of material that I think is really fruitful for our students to develop in programs in religion and environment. A fundamental tenet of resource use in Islam, articulating something like environmental rights, is commonly said to have been set forward by a well-known hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, which is Al-Muslimuna Shuraka'u fi Thalathin Al-Kala'i wal-Ma'i wal-Nar. Sorry, I had the order reversed here. I wrote in English, people are partners in water, vegetation, and fire. It's actually reversed in Arabic, and it's related on the authority of food. Some scholars have interpreted this as a general obligation to sustain life, while other legal scholars have applied the reasoning more specifically to the resources mentioned, namely water, vegetation, and fire. But there are others as well. For example, citing the Sayyid, Islamic legal scholars in the early period discussed the right of access to drinking water in detail. Providing waters for others who need it is considered to be a jabr, or compulsory action. And it also reflects a more general maxim of Islamic law that no harm should be placed on others, which is also a principle of environmental significance. The original hadith is interpreted as belonging to the more encompassing legal category of a public partnership. And I just want to mention this for a minute because it's an interesting contrast to the Anglophone law that we have here in the United States and in many international contexts. It applies to a resource for which each party is not a full owner, namely water and other examples, and therefore no single interest can exercise control over the resource without the other's permission. Related issues about water rights cover questions of community well-being, like building settlements in a flood-prone area, like along a river. Addressing classical questions like the tragedy of the commons of Anglophone systems, with this, Islamic jurisprudential norms already have a well-articulated principle of community rights connected to environmental resources. And as such, it's really different from the individual thinking about property and rights that you get, say, in John Locke and in other ethical and legal systems like in those of Europe. So it's a big contribution that can come globally from Islamic law. And then third and finally, there's the overall framework of environmental justice, what I'll call EJ as an abbreviation in English. Akhirnya kita sampai pada environmental justice atau keadilan lingkungan. Sebuah bidang yang sangat penting terutama bagi negara-negara di Global South. Islam memberikan banyak kontribusi dalam hal ini, baik secara ajaran maupun praktik. Kerangka ini telah saya tulis dalam sebuah artikel that's open access in the Journal of the Muslim World yang diterbitkan oleh Harvard International University, institusi yang sama di mana Bapak Menteri baru-baru ini menerima gelar kehormatan. With this, law is understood in terms of wider principles of justice and ethics, and on which the Quran, of course, has much material to offer. Seperti halnya liberation theology dalam teologi Kristen Katolik, environmental justice, or EJ, berbasis pada advokasi komunitas dan aktivisme grassroots atau rumput. Dalam bingkai keagamaan, area ini mencakup perintah Al-Quran untuk melindungi mereka yang tertindas dan dipinggirkan, seperti gagasan tentang keadilan akhir dan pertanggungjawaban di hadapan hisab, keadilan, dan sejati. Bagi para humanis sekuler, hal ini mungkin terdengar abstrak, sampai mereka menyadari betapa pentingnya pertimbangan etis yang menyangkut masa depan umat manusia dan kemungkinan kehancuran total kehidupan di bumi. So, it might seem irrelevant to people who don't put much stock in religion until you realize we all face these ultimate horizons at the scale of the Anthropocene. Muslim perspectives, starting with Quran and required ritual actions like zakat, highlight issues of equity and justice really prominently. To act with commitment on behalf of the oppressed and marginalized within both proximate and ultimate registers appears throughout the text as an emphatic message of social justice in the Quran. There are multiple expressions that name what is oppression in the text, like dhulm, and all of these are relevant to conditions of environmental equity, like environmental racism, when considering disproportional impacts on communities. Significantly, this isn't an individualized call to a private morality, but a collective one that's incumbent on entire communities, articulated constantly by the voices of prophets in the Quran. The text is full of consequential terms like adl and qist, and exhorts the righteous by stating more than once the imperative of standing up for justice. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamin lillahi shuhada'a bil qisti. Example from Surah Al-Nisa. This is for the sake of this world and also the world to come. Sebagai kesimpulan sekaligus perluasan gagasan tentang IJ, saya ingin kembali menyoroti the theme of Global South and sustainability by way of close. Berbeda dengan ekologi atau iklim, sistem yang menjadi fokus utama dalam sustainability biasanya adalah sistem sosial atau sistem manusia, bukan ekosistem saja, baik dalam konteks saat ini maupun dalam kerangka futuristik. Seperti halnya universitas global, bidang sustainability mempertemukan beragam disiplin ilmu seperti ekonomi, bisnis, teknik, studi pembangunan, like development. It's actually where the field began. Meskipun pendekatan ini tidak selalu sepaham, like these are different strings that are coming together, semuanya menggunakan bahasa yang sama, that is the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, dari UNDP. Banyak solusi praktis dalam konteks lingkungan Islam, example dari pengelolaan sampah, hingga program simbolik seperti Green Hajj dan Ramadan, berakar pada semangat sustainability. Hal ini menjadi sangat relevan bagi seluruh wilayah Global South from the perspective of dekolonisasi, epistemologis terhadap gagasan sustainability itu sendiri, apalagi jika kita mengingat bahwa krisis imperialisme sudah berlangsung lama dan terus direproduksi secara non-sustainable, termasuk dalam isu keadilan iklim. So with this, I would like to menegaskan bahwa saya sungguh percaya solusi nyata akan datang dari wilayah Global South dan melalui pendekatan interfaith, termasuk fiqh dan syariah dan prinsip Islam. Berbeda dengan narasi yang menggambarkan wilayah itu hanya sebagai korban kasih krisis iklim dan lingkungan, or sustainability, like this viral photo here on the left of Musalla Waladuna in North Jakarta before it finally sank on the other side of the wall. It's actually a viral photo from the New York Times. Itu yang hilang. Mahasiswa saya that I was teaching over the last year on sabbatical dan yang saya kenal di Indonesia, setiap hari menunjukkan kepada saya bahwa solusi dan aksi nyata sedang dan akan terus dikerjakan. So with that, I think I can conclude. This is where I was teaching the last year at Triple IU, and I was very inspired May we all be able to work together to find pathways for environment sustainability and climate action. Ameen. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I hope to see you all soon. Inshallah, should be in Indonesia in just a few more weeks. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Gade. And for the next speaker, we will listen to the recorded video from Michael Nurkot, because the topic is related to the environmentalism.
Hello, good evening. It's very good of you to invite me to address your very important